Hello, welcome to the Eddie V Show, back live on this Wednesday. Welcome to July. We got a great show for you today. We're going to be talking about some more Vatican I if you weren't already sick of that. And specifically, we're going to be talking just briefly because I heard another Catholic influencer, theologian, man, whatever you want to call them. I won't say who it was. It just seems unnecessary. But they're always putting out this same misconception, maybe I'll call it, that there have only been 2 minimum, 6 maximum infallible statements from the Pope in all of church history, which I just believe is incredibly false. It is way more than that. And I'm just going to show where I'm getting that from in the Vatican I documents. And then I will, because I've talked about it before, I've talked about this document before, so I'm not going to go into it too much of an example of a recent infallible statement, not 1950, not 12th. Another one that, just flies on the radar because people are looking for these extravagant statements to be infallible or ex cathedra. So we're going to talk about that, and I'll just walk through, because before I talked about the document as an example, but then I didn't show in Vatican I, and I just feel like it's appropriate here in case anyone calls me out on it, where I'm getting this information. So we'll briefly go through that. Then I want to talk about just some I know it's been a while since we've gone back to it, but some end notes on the purgative stage. So remember, there's in the spiritual life, according to these doctors we're looking at, these 7 or 8 doctors of the church, there's the purgative, there's the illuminative, and there's the unitive being the last one. Stages of the spiritual life. And I'm going to give you a couple of notes to close out the purgative stage, and then I'm going to continue into the illuminative stage, as it comes up. I haven't been covering everything from the purgative stage. I've just been covering things that I think are helpful or lesser known for people, just to help them in their spiritual journeys. So we'll do that, and then we'll move next time when I'm talking about stuff from these doctors from the Dr. Ralph Martin book. We'll be in the illuminative stage, so just to let you know. So we'll do that, and then I think I will try at the end just to give some brief comments on the SSPX consecrations and maybe some other stuff if we have time. So that's what we got today on the show. So first, to infallible statements, ex cathedra statements. So why am I talking about this? As I mentioned, I heard someone I really respect who's wicked smart, but I feel like it's almost like a Catholic trope. I know that's not the right word, but just something that's said all the time by Catholics or people that even dislike Catholics, is that the Pope is infallible in certain times and places, and or in certain circumstances, and he's only used that, usually people say, like 2 to 6 times in the history of the church. And I'm here to say, according to Vatican I, that is incorrect. And I'm actually getting this from a professor. I will shout him out. His name is Dr. John Joy, who was one of my professors when I was getting my master's in theology. And this is, I think, one of his passion projects, because he's probably very disappointed in Catholics for not knowing this, that is not true. He talks about how there is different theories about how many, and we can get into that, ranging from like in the hundreds to in the thousands of infallible statements. So we'll maybe discuss that at the end. If I remember, I'll probably forget. But let's get into Vatican I and where I'm getting this from, because we have to discuss the church's own definition of an infallible or ex cathedra statement. So I'm going to be in the last session. I think I wrote it down. This is from the last chapter of the 4th session of Vatican I. So the last session too. So it's like the very, 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 very end of Vatican I. So maybe that's why people haven't read it. I don't know. But people are always talking about infallible statements. So I'm surprised no one goes to the source material to read about this. So you yourself can go online and read this. You can go on the Vatican website, read the Vatican I documents. I'm going to read this here. So this is at the very end of the council documents. It says here, "We teach and define as a divinely revealed dogma that when the Roman pontiff speaks ex cathedra, that is, when in the exercise of his office as shepherd and teacher of all Christians, in virtue of his supreme apostolic authority, he defines a doctrine concerning faith or morals to be held by the whole church. He possesses by the divine assistance promised to him in blessed Peter that infallibility which the divine Redeemer willed his church to enjoy in defining doctrine concerning faith or morals. Therefore, such definitions of the Roman pontiff are of themselves, and not by the consent of the church, irreformable. And then this is the final statement right after. This is just the anathema. So then, should anyone, which God forbid, have the temerity to reject this definition of ours, let him be anathema. So it was a sweet anathema from Vatican I. That was a lot, so we're going to cover it. So this is obviously about ex cathedra statements, which is an infallible statement about faith or morals coming from the Pope. And there's usually considered, you can either pull out, I'm going to pull out 3. Some people can pull out 2. Some people pull out 4. I think 3 is the right number here. 3 characteristics that make an ex cathedra statement, an infallible statement from the Pope. That is irreformable, they say at the end. And so in this definition, they say it is a revealed dogma and it is anathema to think otherwise. So let's look at this. It says when, so he's talking about when the Roman pontiff speaks ex cathedra, that is when, so right after that when is when the magisterium is describing when this happens. In the exercise of his office as shepherd and teacher of all Christians, that's 1. So in the exercise of his office. So a good example of this is kind of an obvious example, but when Pope Benedict releases a book on scripture, it's usually called the Jesus series, I can't remember, or Jesus of Nazareth series, he says, I am doing this as a private theologian. That would not be in his exercise of his office. That's a very obvious example. There's other examples we could use. So 1, in the exercise of his office as shepherd and teacher of all Christians, he defines a doctrine concerning faith or morals. That's 2. So it's going to be only things on faith and morals that he can be infallible on or make an ex cathedra statement. So we got 1, 2. And then the 3rd is to be held by the whole church. That's 3. So any exercise of his office that fulfills those 3, I guess the exercise is one of them. What would I say? Any statement from the magisterium that has these 3 is going to be considered an infallible statement. And this is not based on me saying that. This is based on Vatican I discussing that. So those 3 things, I'll go through them again. In the exercise of his office as shepherd and teacher of all Christians, 1. And it says in virtue of his supreme apostolic authority. That's just the same thing. And that's my opinion. Maybe you disagree with that. You can let me know. He defines a doctrine concerning faith or morals 2. And this is to be held by the whole church. So just to kind of go through some stuff. So maybe he's using his office and maybe he's defining something on faith or morals, but he's not binding the whole church to it. Would that be an ex cathedra statement? That would not be. Maybe sometimes in the exercise of his office, he's talking about something for the whole church, but it's not on faith and morals. That would not be an ex cathedra statement. Just to be clear, these would, depending on the situation, would probably be authoritative, which means Catholics need to obey, but it doesn't mean it's infallible, it's irreformable. So those are the characteristics. And so, yes, the statements from like Pius IX in 1854 and Pius XII in 1950, those obviously fulfill those. They were very, with pomp and everything like that. But there are a ton of other statements that fulfill this. Arguably, and people argue, so this is kind of where you get the different numbers of like, oh, there's hundreds of them or there's thousands of them. People even argue that the anathemas could be considered infallible statements. And I'm honestly of that camp. When you read the documents that have these anathemas, they're usually saying, in my office as Peter, for all of the faithful, I declare to believe this is anathema in the Holy Catholic Church in some faith and morals subject. So I honestly am of the opinion, and you can read those for yourself. There's a bunch of pre-Vatican II anathemas that you can check out and see the language of the introduction to the anathema and the anathema itself. But I do think those fulfill it. But the basic point here is there's way more than 2 to 6 infallible statements, and it would do well for any Catholic to know them and to uphold these truths. Obviously, some of them are not going to be very relevant to you, but a lot of them will be. And the example I give, and I put the document in the description, is Ordinatio Sacerdotalis, or whatever pronunciation you want to use. Is from John Paul II. So it's very recent papacy where he makes the infallible statement, ex cathedra statement in a document about how only men can be priests in the Holy Catholic Church, or men can be priests just generally, because that is where the real priests are. And then, yeah, I'm not going to get into the, just take that as you will. I know there's some nuance there. So I hope that is helpful. Please let me know if you have any questions, and please I'm thinking of messaging that theologian I heard say that. Maybe message them on X, Twitter, whatever. But yeah, there's way more that the church has defined infallibly. We don't have to play these guessing games. There's just a lot of infallible stuff. So make sure you know that, and especially if you're a theologian, you can kind of maneuver in the dogmas, doctrines, with the knowledge that, yes, as long as they fulfill these requirements, they are an ex cathedra statement. So hopefully that was helpful. Let me know if it wasn't. Let me know if it was. I'd love to hear. So that was that. I'm going to move on from that. There was, at the beginning, I was saying something about what I would talk about, but I forgot. Let's move into the end of the purgative stage. So we're talking about things that are crucial for the first stage of the spiritual life, the first third of the spiritual life. And there's just a couple of notes I had that were powerful to me. So these saints are talking about, and we're kind of in a section that's hitting a lot of Saint Bernard, Saint Teresa of Lisieux, Saint Teresa of Avila, but other ones too, Saint Francis of Sales. And they talk about how, and this is in the Gospels too, how taking on the little temptations is so crucial. Some people just think about the big things. They're like, oh, as long as I just don't commit adultery, I don't commit murder, which obviously don't do those things. But they're talking about how day to day, you're probably not going to be facing those temptations day to day, but you need to be faithful to the little temptations, like that little twinge to anger, that little twinge to envy. Like those types of things are going to be so powerful in the spiritual life, are going to be so crucial if you want to move further in the spiritual life, move to those later stages, move in union with God. Very important. And then this is very important, I think, for new converts. Like I remember when I was first coming to the faith, I was so gung-ho on doing these grandiose kind of deeds for the Lord, like being St. Francis of Assisi or something like that. And the fact of the matter is, and our Lord talks about this in the Gospels too, is like, he who is faithful in little things will be given greater things. So really, if you want to help out the church, help out the Lord, like he doesn't need help, but help out the Lord, you're going to need to show that you can be faithful in the small things first. And then he can give you the bigger things. If you just try to go to the bigger things, you are going to fall on your butt. You're going to be angry. You're going to be frustrated. I'm speaking from experience, because you're not ready for those things. If you can't be patient in a regular situation, how are you going to help do some crazy missionary endeavor? You're not. You're going to make it worse. You're going to fall flat on your face. So this is just very practical. And this is just amazing advice for the spiritual life. Something that people don't want to pay attention to, because it's difficult, it's tedious, it's day to day. I don't get a lot of glory from it. It's just you day to day becoming a better person, increasing in virtue, increasing in prayer. So if you want to do great things for the Lord, you're going to have to start here first with those little things. So good luck. Good luck on your journey. Like, start there. Don't worry about doing something crazy. Do the little things right first. The next thing is, when we have temptations, whatever it is, these doctors of the church, they talk about how it's so crucial, if we have a temptation to a vice, to focus. A thing you could do is focus on doing acts of the opposite of that vice, the virtue that is opposite to it. So if you're tempted to impatience, the doctors are like, you need to start right now, like doing crazy acts of patience, almost like and this might sound crazy, but like almost exaggerating patience. And you could think of examples of that. It's like if you're feeling the temptation to be impatient, you're in traffic or something like that. It's like you need to like even I'm just this is just an example. You need to drive even like slower than you are and like just be focusing on like I'm going to be like insanely patient, like almost too patient with this traffic. So that's what the saints talk about. That's kind of a weird example, but hopefully you get the drift of it. The next thing is openness. The devil, as these church doctors say, not me saying this, the church doctors, the devil loves when you keep things to yourself, when you have some temptations, some vices, and you refuse to share them, whether out of shame, um, desire to look good, things like that. If you can have a spiritual director or a trusted spiritual friend, not just a trusted friend, a friend who is active in the spiritual life, share that stuff with them. Obviously, in confession, share your mortal sins, but temptation, stuff like that, share that stuff with that spiritual director. Get it out in the open. That will drive the temptation away, drive the devil away. Is it a foolproof 100% thing? I don't know, but it's really helped me, and the church doctors are saying it. So you just need to consider doing that, or just do it. Honestly, just do it. But hopefully that makes sense, and that's obviously a big part of confession too. But obviously, going to be with sins, mortal sins, venial sins. But as soon as you're able to share that, to confess it, to get it out in the open, outside of your own heart, incredibly helpful for in the purgative stage, and also obviously throughout all the stages. And the last thing is when you're tempted, and if this has a demonic aspect, which I imagine most, if not all, do, obviously the flesh and the world, but the devil is very active and the demons are very active. If every time you're tempted, whatever temptation you're struggling with, if you immediately start thinking about the Lord's passion, the Lord's cross, his crucifixion, every single time, do you think the devil's going to want to keep tempting you with that? The devil doesn't want to drive you to the cross. He doesn't want to drive you to our Lord in his passion. So the saints is really cool. I think this is amazing advice. Run to the cross with temptation. And it's not just like, okay, great, pious thing, I'll do that. It's like you got to actually do it in your mind. Even physically, I still haven't put this up. I'm going to put it up soon, maybe. But literally, you could grab a crucifix, grab a cross, and look at it in temptation. Like just be like, devil, every time you tempt me with this or that vice, with that deed or thought, boom, I'm right here with the Lord. I'm at the cross. I'm at the crucifixion. So you can get in your mind, you can get physical with it, but that's really going to help you. So those are kind of like the last thoughts of the purgative way. We're going to be moving to the illuminative. A lot of stuff in the purgative. I still recommend reading the book. I didn't cover like even close to 75% of it. So it's still a great book to get. I'll show it one last time in the purgative stage. Please get it if you want to grow in the spiritual. Honestly, I think this is like, obviously you have other books, but like this is like all encompassing. I think you'd be good to go in the spiritual life just with this book. If you're like one of those people that has to buy like 7,000 books for one thing, you could just get that book. And I'm not paid by them. I don't even know what publisher it is. I'm just saying it's a great book. Okay, so those are the two main topics I wanted to get to. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please let me know. Like, subscribe on the video, comment is much appreciated, and share the video as well. But I'm going to get into like kind of bonus time. These are not things I wanted to talk about, but they just kind of happened, so I want to talk about them. But the first, and maybe the only, is the SSPX consecrations. They happen in Switzerland sometime today or yesterday. I don't know the time difference from here in America. Pretty crazy. This is just my thoughts on it. I did not expect them to actually go through with it. I understand that they were delayed initially. They're supposed to be in June, and it happened, July 1st. Pretty sad. I was looking at some of the videos because a bunch of people showed up, apparently thousands. I don't know if it was thousands, but it looked like a good amount of people. It was spooky. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't want to be too dramatic, but I was watching some of the videos of the actual consecration and the before and after and during. And it was just kind of spooky. Like, I've heard of schismatic acts, in the history of the church, and I've read about them. But to be alive during kind of this very visible on video schismatic act. It was, it was done in a, obviously, I don't want to be scandalous here. It was, from what I saw, very traditional, beautiful way. But still, I'm looking at it, it's just I'm cringing. It's very spooky. Like you're just throwing yourself off of the boat of Peter. Just wild. So those are my honest thoughts about it. The other thing you can and I don't know if I even encourage it. What was said in like the homily of it, I just read a little bit of it. Is like it is when you go schismatic. And this is maybe prideful to say, but like your inability to see the illogical pathways of your own speech is just crazy. It just sounded like the head of the order, I forgot his name, is just he thinks like he's the head of the church or he knows better, and it's just crazy. So yeah, I just imagine that's like kind of the same thought process of people like Luther, Calvin, even some of the older schismatics and heretics and stuff. It was just crazy spooky. So, but let's talk about the other part of this is what moving forward. Obviously, everyone's kind of waiting. I don't know if he's spoken on this yet. I haven't looked. Everyone's waiting for Pope Leo to speak on this. I forgot to look up before the show. I believe this is just an automatic excommunication now. So at minimum, the consecrated and the consecrators, if I may, have already been excommunicated automatically by their act. And then Pope Leo, just if he decides to talk about it, which I don't know if he will, but hopefully he will, because he seemed like he was aware of what's going on. Those guys will be excommunicated, but it'll be interesting to see if Pope Leo, makes it public, like these guys are in fact excommunicated, has some sort of liturgical act associated with, just talks about it. And then also I'm curious to see how Pope Leo deals with the people involved with SSPX, because now the SSPX, before people could argue there's some ambiguity there, but the leadership of the SSPX just went forward with a schismatic act. So I don't think there's any pretending now that you can be like, is the SSPX schismatic? So I'd really like to see Pope Leo speak about the people that adhere to the SSPX and what's their fate. I was telling my mom today what if I was Pope, what I would do. I'm not going to speak about all of it, but in terms of those people that adhere to the schism, I would like Pope Leo to be very strong-handed with them. Not for the sake of, being mean, for the sake of their souls. Like, you are adhering to schism. You need to get out of there. I think it'd be cool if cool is maybe not the right word. I think it would be a good act of him to excommunicate them as well. I don't know if this is the right way to say this, but to put the fear of God into them, so they understand truly like what their situation is. I don't know if you'll do that. That's just me. Maybe I'm mean. You can let me know in the comments. But yeah, we'll see what happens. It's giving me a weird feeling. I just didn't think they would do it. They've done it, and it's kind of crazy because I was looking at it. It's like so many beautiful people in terms of beautiful people visually, but like beautiful people as like I imagine a lot of them are just very confused about the modern state of the church. And I'm just if we could have those people in the church fighting for tradition, because I side with the traditional aspects of the church, but obedient to the Pope. Obviously you have to be. If we could have them fighting with us, if we could have them in the church, that would be just amazing. So this schism is very harmful. It's not good. It's definitely not good. So we want these SSPX people back in the bark of Peter for sure. So be praying, be sacrificing for them. This is for real. Yeah, and there was one other thing I wanted to say about this SSPX. I'm blanking. That's okay though. What was it? SSPX. There's a bunch of religious there. The SSPX has religious, I think one religious order actually for women. There was a lot of them there. This is not what I was trying to think of, but it was a little funny because it started pouring rain, I guess, during communion, so they had to, like, delay. It was just a spooky vibe, but, like, people were saying, like, "Oh, the wrath of God," and it's possible for sure, but I don't know if you wanna put too much stock into that. It is a cool thing, though, that it started pouring rain during that on their tent. But that's not what I wanted to speak about. SSPX. I did wanna talk about, these guys, as far as I understand, are technically they have the consecration, but, it's illicit, and they're immediately excommunicated, so it's just a really crazy situation. Yeah, I really hope these guys come back, but, to be honest, those, I think there was 4 in 1988 that were consecrated, and 2 of them died, and they never came back. Maybe 3 of them died now, I can't remember. Didn't come back. I know Bishop Williamson, as far as I'm aware, did not come back into the church. He was given a bunch of opportunities. Pope Benedict, lifted their excommunications in 2009, I believe, and he still wouldn't sign the profession of faith. It's just craziness. And I talked about this yesterday, but I do desire that the Latin Mass comes back. I'm not a huge fan of the Novus Ordo. I know it's just my preference, but I just don't think it's helpful to the faithful. And I do think there's a lot of laxity in the church right now, which has happened before. It's not like a new thing. So I do desire those traditional things. And I do think, this is the thing. I remembered. This is the thing. I do think the SSPX, they use the Tridentine Mass to pull people away from the church, because the SSPX is not just the Latin Mass. I think a lot of people have that misconception. They have true doctrinal, and I don't even know if there's dogma, but doctrinal issues with the church. So it's not just the Latin Mass. So even if, I think it'd be really cool, honestly, and this is another thing I was telling my mom. I think it'd be really cool if Pope Leo granted more. I mean, this might seem weak for, like, people would be like, "Oh, what a weak move," but I just think it'd be great if he granted more freedom to the Latin Mass. I think that would draw a lot of those SSPXers away. And if he's thinking about the care of souls, I think that would be very powerful. I know Pope Francis thought that the Latin Mass was being used for schism, but I'm like, but if you just let people have it, they won't need to be schismatic. And I understand the other position is like, well, they don't want to do that, and they should just listen. I understand that. The popes don't want the Latin Tridentine Mass. They want the Novus Ordo to be the thing. I don't want that, but I'm going to be obedient to the Pope. And maybe in the future, there'll be a Pope that loves the Latin Mass and he'll bring it back. But we'll see. But I do think the SSPX uses that, and people need to understand that for sure. That's what I wanted to talk about. Cool. Is there another thing? I was going to talk about how Catholics are just super liberal. And I don't mean liberal as in like left wing in modern US politics, which is probably also true. But I mean liberal as in we're kind of like an everything goes open society, very tolerant of like everything all the time. And I just, that's what I mean by liberal. And I don't like, we're very open and all this stuff to all the different things. Everything is equal of value. I know the church doesn't teach that, but like that's the vibes. That's probably the beliefs of a lot of Catholics is like, it's all about tolerance of sin, tolerance of this and that. And this like self-hatred of Western culture, of Western history, of Catholic history, Christian history. I just wanted to stop. Maybe I'm just preaching to the choir here, because I know the older generations, they're very much about this, and the younger generations seem to be transitioning from this, getting out of that mindset, which is great. But I just want to, because I've just been seeing a bunch of stuff. This Amy Comey Barrett thing is just blowing my mind in like 1,000 different ways. That's more a political thing, but it's just crazy. Just crazy. And I'm surprised people haven't talked about it with her. Maybe they talked about it with her when she was sworn in as the Supreme Court judge. Because she has like a lot of kids apparently. And she's a Supreme Court judge in the United States. I just, I, it's like, if you want to be a Supreme Court judge as a woman, maybe we have a problem with that. Maybe we don't in principle. But if you're choosing to be a wife and a mother, that is not, that is not in that. I don't think that's okay. That is just craziness. And she's Catholic. I don't know. She's a practicing Catholic, I'm assuming, but it happens when we assume. And yeah, and she just makes this, I think, wild decision. And then I saw people conflating it with like, oh, look what the Catholics do. Which is crazy because you have, I think, the three dissenting judges are also Catholic. So you just have a lot of Catholics in the Supreme Court, which, Catholics, we have, if, you're practicing the faith, you have that discipline to do a difficult job like that. But yeah, just Amy Coney Barrett kind of let us down. I think even Kavanaugh, you could argue, let us down there, another Catholic. But yeah, she's got a lot of kids. It's like, I think about for that husband, it's like, I don't want to over exaggerate it, but like you just lost your wife to this occupation. And then your kids don't have a mother in the home. Like how much of the time? It's like that's a heavy, heavy, heavy burden. We can talk. Maybe that's its own episode too. I don't know if I talked about that before. If you want more on that, Timothy Gordon talks about that a lot. So maybe I should just feed that to him. I don't know if I agree 100%. I have to look and see what he says again. But I do enjoy him. But anyway, that was another thing I want to talk about. But that'll be it for today. We're in July. Things are going on. Things are happening. Make sure you're focusing on growing in virtue, loving the Lord, staying in the bark of Peter, staying in the church. And yeah, and things will be well with you. So that's all I have today. Please like, subscribe, comment. Let me know what you think about what I've said, about the show. Please share the show if you thought it was good. And I will see you next time. God bless you. God be with you. Goodbye.